She opened the door because something scraped the porch. Not wind, not wood swelling. Something placed there, deliberate, slow. She stepped out without boots. The boards were cold. A boy stood there, no taller than her hip, stacking firewood like it was the most natural thing in the world. One piece, then another. His hands were black with ash, his shirt torn at the collar, too thin for the season. She stared at him without speaking. He didn't startle. He didn't turn slow like some stray found out of place. He just looked up like he'd been expecting. Mama said this was my job now. Her voice caught halfway up her throat. Who's your mama? He didn't answer. Just picked up another log, placed it on the stack, carefully turned the flat side out like he'd done it 100 times. She stepped back. Just a half step, not enough to close the door. You lost? No, ma'am. Are you hungry? He looked at her then. Really looked. She said you'd ask that first. Said you always fed folks before you named 'em. The porch was still. The only sound was the shifting wood as he kept stacking. I didn't hear no car. Didn't take one. You walk? Been walking a while. She looked out past the dirt path that cut through the trees. No footprints, no tire marks. Just quiet. What's your name? He hesitated. She said not to give it till you asked 3 times. Asked what? If I'd been here before. She crossed her arms, stepped out onto the porch proper, let the door swing shut behind her. Have you been here before? Yes, ma'am. She blinked. When? When I was a baby. She didn't answer. He added another log. The stack was near perfect. Too perfect. You shouldn't be here. She said you'd say that. He looked up again, steady, like he wasn't afraid of the weight behind her voice. She also said you might cry, but not the first day. You need to go back to wherever you came from. Can't. Mama's gone. Gone where? He didn't blink. Into the ground. The words didn't break. Just sat there, heavy and straight. When? Last week. Might have been more. I stopped counting after the river. She moved fast then, down the steps, knelt in front of him, hands on his shoulders. He didn't flinch. What river? Didn't have a name, but it took our boots. I carried her till she got too quiet. She stood back up. I walked to the end of the porch. I looked toward town. Nothing. I looked toward the woods. Nothing. You walked here barefoot. He lifted one sole, black with mud, cracked. I'm not your kin. She said you were. What's her name then? He said nothing. Just placed the last log on the stack, patting it once like it needed settling. Are you cold? No, ma'am. Are you hungry? He looked up. That's... Twice. She almost laughed. Almost. Where'd she say I lived? In the house with the broken porch rail and the dog that never barked. She looked over her shoulder at the split rail where her husband fell drunk 6 years back and broke his collarbone. The dog had died the winter after. No one knew that. Are you sure she said that? Yes, ma'am. Her hand went to the porch post. What else does she say? That the attic had things you forgot. That the kitchen still smelled like soap. That you keep your tea on the second shelf behind the tin. He walked past her before she could move. Into the house. Through the open door, like he'd lived there all his life. She followed. He stood in the kitchen, reached up, pulled the tin aside. There was tea. He set it on the table. Water hot? No. Where's the kettle? Sit down, she said. He did. Feet dangling off the chair. You know how long I've been alone? Yes, ma'am. She stared. You don't talk like a 6-year-old. Don't feel like one either. She reached for the kettle anyway. Started the stove. Your mama teaches you manners. She said to call you ma'am. Said that was safest. Why safest? In case you got mean before you got soft. The stove clicked. Flame caught. I don't hit children. She didn't either, but you yelled at her once. She said she never forgot it. She turned slowly. When? A long time ago. Before the baby. Before the fire. Her chest pulled tight. What fire? He looked up. His voice was soft now. The one upstairs. She dropped the kettle. It hit the stove. Steam hissed. He didn't move. She said it wasn't your fault. She stepped back, eyes wide. You need to leave. I can't. Why not? She said this was my job now. To what? He stood. I walked back to the porch, picked up a fresh piece of wood. To keep the fire lit, keep the porch warm, Keep you company till you remember. She stood frozen. Remember what? He set the log on the hearth. How much you loved her, before they made you forget. She reached for the wall to steady herself. He sat cross-legged on the rug, hands folded. Where'd you sleep last night? Under the old barn awning. There's nothing left out there. I know. She looked at the boy, his fingers dark with soot, knees scraped, hair matted, calm as stone. The fire caught. He watched it. Will you stay inside tonight? Only if you let me. She sat across from him. You think I will? I think you already did. She didn't sleep. The fire stayed lit through the night, low and careful. The boy hadn't moved from the rug, curled up beside the hearth like he'd been born beside it. She sat in the rocker, unmoving, arms crossed, watching him breathe. At dawn, he stirred, sat up, rubbed his eyes with the backs of his hands, looked around like he was checking for ghosts. Are you hungry? She asked. He nodded once. She moved to the stove, slow and stiff, pulled down the pan, cracked 2 eggs. No toast, no meat, just eggs and quiet. He watched her work. You always wore your hair up, he said. She didn't look at him, just stirred the pan. Who told you that? You did. When you were scared, you let it go, but when you were strong, you tied it up tight. She stopped stirring. The eggs hissed. Her jaw clenched. She plated the eggs, slid them across the table. You talk too much. He picked up the fork. Mama said the same thing. Don't call her that, she snapped. He looked up. What should I call her then? She ain't mine. He didn't argue, just took a bite, chewed slowly. You lived here once, he said between mouthfuls. No, I didn't. You sure? She pointed at the window. That road out there's seen every person that's ever walked to this house. I watched it for 10 years. No one came. I did. You don't remember 10 years. I remember the crib, the blue blanket, the screaming. She slammed the skillet back on the stove. Enough. He didn't flinch. You remember the stairs. What about them? They creak 2 steps from the top, every night, even when no one's walking. She froze, slowly turned. How would you know that? I used to count them when I was scared. She stepped toward him, voice low. You said that before. Used to sleep upstairs before screaming. What did you mean? He looked past her, toward the hallway. Want me to show you? She hesitated, then nodded. He climbed the stairs, barefoot and light, like he'd done it hundreds of times. She followed, gripping the rail. It hadn't been touched in years. At the landing, he turned left without asking. The second door, the one she'd nailed shut after the fire. He pressed his hand to the wood. You still keep it locked? I don't open rooms that don't matter. He looked at her, calm. It matters. She pulled the hammer from the hall closet, pried the nails loose, one by one. The door groaned when it opened, like something old had been breathing behind it. The smell hit first. Character, dust, a memory that had gone stale. She stepped inside. The crib was still there, half burned, mattress gone, one leg scorched black. A torn piece of blue fabric clung to the slat. Her breath caught. He pointed to the far wall. Look. She turned. There, just above the baseboard, faint and uneven, was a handprint. Small, pressed in soot, smudged, but visible. That's mine, he said. No, it ain't. She crouched, touched it. The size was right, too small for anyone but a toddler. She wiped at it, half hoping it'd vanish. It didn't. She stood fast, backed away from the wall. You're lying. No, ma'am. No one's been in here since the fire. He said it plainly. Her knees nearly gave. I thought it was empty. You didn't look. There wasn't nothing left. You didn't look, he repeated. She grabbed the door frame. Your mama, she told you this? Told you what to say? He shook his head. She never told me about the room. I just remembered. She stared at him hard. You want me to believe you lived here, that I forgot a child? He nodded. You're insane. I'm real. This is a trick. Then how come I knew where the tea was? She looked past him, at the crib, at the handprint, at the scorched floorboards where she'd once dumped a bucket of water in a panic, thinking the fire would spread. She turned to leave. He followed. Back in the kitchen, she poured herself a glass of water. Her hand trembled. You said you remembered screaming. He nodded. Whose? He sat back down. Yours. She blinked. You were holding something. Wrapped up. You were crying. You said you were sorry. Then the smoke came. She dropped the glass. It shattered. He stayed seated. You keep saying your mama sent you, that she died. What was her name? He paused. Then, Lena. She froze. The name hit like thunder. That name doesn't belong here. It used to. No. She was your sister. Get out. He stood. You lived here once, he said again. You just stopped telling yourself that. She backed away. You think I forgot everything? You think I'd forget my own blood? She said they made you forget. Who? He turned slowly. The man with the badge, the one who told you she died before she gave birth. She went still. He kept going. He said you were too weak to raise her child, that it'd be better if she was just gone. Tears welled. No. He pointed at the knife block. You thought about using it that night, but you didn't. She looked at the blade, still clean, still sharp. You lived here once, he whispered. So did I. I think we still do. He walked to the hearth, sat again. Quiet. She dropped into the rocker. The wind howled outside, but she didn't hear it, only his breath, and the fire, and the echo of a name she never said out loud. The boy didn't ask. Just walked past the kitchen, past the cracked wall with the faded calendar still stuck on last December, and stopped at the narrow stair that led up to the attic. She hadn't looked at that door in years, hadn't touched the knob since they boarded it shut the night the inspector came. She stayed at the foot of the stairs, frozen. You don't go up there, she said. The boy looked down at her, 1 foot already on the first step. Mama said you'd remember if you saw it. Her throat closed. I ain't got nothing to remember. He didn't answer. I just climbed slowly, step by step. His bare feet left prints in the dust. She followed, like something pulled her. Not fast, not brave, just quiet. The attic door was thin pine, painted over in haste. The knob stuck. He turned it anyway, pushed. It creaked loud enough to wake every sin she buried. She stepped up behind him. Her hand gripped the railing. Don't go in. But he already had. Inside, scorched rafters, charred crib frame. She smelled it before she saw it, smoke clinging to old insulation, to the bones of what used to be wood. She stepped into the doorway and stopped. The light filtered in through one broken pane. Software dusty. Still. The crib sat where it always had. 2 slats broken, 1 corner sagged. Burn marks spidered up the back wall where the fire never finished its work. The air was wrong. Too still. Like something waited. She backed out. Fast. Her heel caught on the last step. She hit the wall and slid down, arms shaking. The boy didn't move, just stood at the edge of the crib, staring inside. She pressed her back to the wall. No. The boy sat, legs crossed, hands in his lap, calm. And then he started humming. The sound hit her like a slap. It was a lullaby, familiar. 4 notes, 2 hums, a long pause, then the same again. She knew it. She'd heard it once through the door, before it burned. No, she whispered again. The boy kept humming. She crawled up to the doorframe, looked in without entering. You stop that. He didn't. That's not yours to sing. He kept going. She grabbed the edge of the frame like it could hold her upright. I told you I never had a child. He looked at her then. I didn't say I was yours. She flinched. Then why are you here? He glanced at the crib. She said I was meant to carry the memory. What does that mean? She said memories die if no one speaks them. Said you buried it. That it still breathes up here. She stared hard at the blackened wall. I buried the past. No, ma'am. You just locked it. She stepped in. Just once. The boards groaned. The smell was worse inside. She covered her nose. You going to tell me what this is? He looked up at her, eyes steady. This is the room you forgot. I didn't forget it. I survived it. His voice dropped. She screamed once, just once. Then it got quiet. Her knees shook. Stop. You were outside the door. Stop. You didn't open it fast enough. I said stop. She yelled it so loud her throat burned. The boy didn't flinch, didn't cry. Just wait, then soft. You smelled smoke before you heard her voice. She sat on the floor, hard, her back to the wall, the fire, the broken latch. The night no one came when she screamed. I thought she was sleeping, she said, barely above a breath. He nodded. She was, until she wasn't. Her hands gripped her skirt. She wasn't mine. She was my sister's. The boy watched her crumble. She gave her to me. Said just for one night, just one. She had to run. I had to tell the sheriff something. I don't remember what. He stood. I walked to the far side of the room, pulled back a warped board. Behind it, tucked in the wall, was a melted spoon. He held it out. She fed me with this. That's what Mama said. She didn't take it. She said I liked it cold. I laughed when it touched my gums. Tears streaked her cheeks. I didn't know. He set the spoon down gently on the floor between them. I think she forgave you. She stared at the flame marks, the crib, the spoon, the boy. I wouldn't. She said you did the best you could with what you were told. I should have opened the door. You did. Just too late. Silence stretched, long. The boy sat again, hummed softer this time. She let the tune wash over her. Didn't fight it, didn't run. This was the room she never opened, and now she couldn't leave it the same. The tune kept winding through the blackened beams like it never left. Software careful. 4 notes, 2 hums, a pause, then again. The boy sat cross-legged by the crib, shoulders swaying gently with the rhythm. She stood just inside the doorway, hands clenched, eyes fixed on him. Where'd you learn that song? He didn't look up, just kept humming. She stepped closer. Her boots creaked on the warped floor. I said, where'd you hear it? He stopped. The silence after was heavier than the song. She used to sing it, he said. Who? Mama? You keep saying that word like I'm supposed to let it mean something. He turned. She said you'd say that too. Is she wrong? He pointed to the crib. She said this was your worst place, the one you tried to bury under 10 years of silence. Said music was the only thing that made it past the door. I don't have a sister, she whispered. He tilted his head. She said you'd say that part quietly. She moved fast, reached out, gripped the scorched crib rail. The ash flaked off under her palm, soft like it never burned hot enough to finish what it started. Tell me her name. He didn't blink. Lena. Her grip tightened. No. Yes. She shook her head. That name was a rumor, a bad word on someone else's porch. Not real. She was real. She ran off. I don't know where. She said you did. She left me. She came back. No. He stood. I walked to her slowly. She said you were brave then. You told the sheriff to keep her name off the paper. I didn't. You said she wasn't dead until someone wrote it down. The room swayed. She backed into the crib, hand still on the rail. That's not. She said you loved her more than anyone else. Even after she ran, even after the baby, her knees shook. I never saw the baby. He looked up. You're looking at him. No. I was born here, in this room. She wrapped me in your old quilt, the one with the pine trees. I threw that quilt out. She said you did it because you couldn't stand to see it folded wrong. She slid down the side of the crib, sitting hard on the floor. You're lying. No, ma'am. You're too calm, too rehearsed. You sound like someone told you how to break me. She didn't want to break you. What did she want? She wanted you to open the room. She should have done it herself. She died. The words hit like wood splitting. She didn't come back. She tried. The sheriff wouldn't let her past the church road, said she wasn't safe, that she was dangerous now. She was. She was scared. She looked at him hard. Do you remember her face? He nodded. She had your eyes, but not your voice. What do you mean? She never yelled. Her lip twitched. She yelled once, the night the fire started. He nodded. She said she was trying to wake you. I was asleep on the porch. Drunk. She never blamed you. I would have. She said you were brave then, just not for long. The crib creaked as he sat beside it again. I don't remember her voice, she whispered. I do. You shouldn't. She used to talk to me while she sewed, said names out loud so she wouldn't forget them, said mine was borrowed. Borrowed from who? You. Her mouth parted. She said you had a list of names once, before the fire, before the silence. I never made a list. She said you used to. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a small folded scrap. She told me to give you this when the song came back. She took it with shaking hands. It unfolded slowly. The paper was yellowed, thin, edges worn like it had been held too many times. There were 4 names, 2 crossed out, 1 circled, 1 underlined. She stared. I wrote this. He nodded. Where'd she find it? She said it was in your old sewing box, buried under a pile of receipts. Her breath caught. This was for my daughter. If I ever had one. She said she wanted you to still have the choice. I don't understand. He looked at her. She said if I ended up with you, you'd get to choose again. Choose what? What to call me? She dropped the paper. Why would she do that? She said it was your way of forgiving yourself. I never asked for that. She knew. Silence swelled in the rafters. He sat back down, hummed again. She stared at the paper on the floor, the circled name blurred by her tears. Mama said you were brave then. She reached down, picked up the paper, read the name again, held it in her lap like it might catch fire too. What if I'm not brave now? You are. You opened the door. The tune looped once more. This time she hummed along. She didn't sleep again. The house was too full now, of sound, of breath, of old things opening themselves. At dawn, she pulled the attic door shut, not locked, just closed. The boy stayed near the hearth, humming low, hands folded like a guest waiting to be told what came next. She didn't tell him anything, just swept the kitchen like memory wasn't dust. By mid-morning, her boot caught on a soft spot in the floor. She'd stepped over that plank for years, never once curious, but now, with the song still in her ears and the list of names tucked under her pillow, she dropped to one knee and pried the board up. Below, a tin box, plain, dented, no markings but a line of rust along one corner. She opened it. Inside, old paper, soft with time, a handkerchief, a bent, rusted badge. She stared at the metal. The boy stepped close, suddenly still. His voice dropped. That's his. She looked up. Whose? He pointed toward the front door, toward the road beyond it. The man who made Mama bleed. She didn't move. You saw him. Every week, Thursdays. He brought her medicine, sometimes food. Medicine? For her belly. The words hit sharp. She was sick? He nodded. Only after he came. She set the badge on the table. You're saying it was the sheriff? He said nothing. Say it plain. He looked at her, dead steady. He used to come to the porch, sit, make her talk slow. Mama never looked him in the eyes. She gripped the edge of the table. I told her to leave him. She said she couldn't. She said he had her name on a paper somewhere, that if she left, it'd vanish too. Her throat tightened. I asked her once why she never screamed. What did she say? She said screaming only works if someone's listening. The tin box lay open between them. The paper inside was just receipts, groceries, gas, all signed by the same hand, Sheriff M. Collar. I used to think he was just cruel to her, not evil, just the way some men are when they think they've got nothing to lose. The boy didn't speak. She turned the badge in her hand. It was heavier than it looked. He gave me this the day I turned 25, said I was strong enough to know how the world works now. She laughed once, bitter. I threw it back at him. He picked it up and said I'd thank him later. The boy sat down slowly. She said he came the night I was born, not to help, just to make sure no one else did. Her stomach turned. She said he waited on the porch till the crying started, then left. She reached for the receipts, flipped through them one by one. They spanned years, all scribbled in the same, hurried way. She bought baby formula, diapers, clothes. She saved the ones he gave her. For proof? For someone else. She sat hard in the chair. I thought she vanished. She was made to. She looked down at the badge again. It should have burned with the rest of him. The boy leaned forward. She said you were the only one who could hold it without lying to you. What's that mean? She said he used to hold it up like it gave him permission, like the badge made his hands clean. And mine don't. Number yours no better. She placed the badge back in the tin box. I closed it slowly. I should have gone to town that night. Should have made them see what he did to her. You were afraid. I was ashamed. She said you were brave, just not loud. She stood again. There's more under the house. He blinked. What do you mean? I buried things I couldn't throw away. I didn't want them gone, just gone from sight. She walked to the back door, lifted the hatch beside the steps, pulled the old tarp away. Underneath, boxes, blankets, one boot, a broken baby rattle. She pulled one box up, dusted it off. Inside, letters, dozens, all addressed to the same name. Heron return address, L. Marin. She clutched the top one, unopened. She tried. The boy nodded. She wrote every month, said she was coming home, said she just needed you to forgive her first. Her hand trembled. I never opened them, though if I didn't read them, I didn't have to feel anything. You felt it anyway. She nodded. She brought the badge inside, set it on the hearth beside the fire. He watched her. What are you going to do with it? She looked down at it. Let it melt. Won't it take time? She nodded. So we wait. He sat back down by the fire, legs crossed. Quiet. She sat beside him. The badge didn't melt yet, but it would. The knock came like it always had. Not rushed, not polite. A hollow rhythm carved from habit, not need. She froze where she stood, hand on the kettle. The boy didn't flinch. You hear that? She asked. He nodded. Stay here. He stepped toward the door. Did you hear what I said? He turned back, calm. Mama said he wouldn't shoot if I looked like her. Her heart stopped in her chest. Don't you open that door. But he already had. The hinges groaned, dust shifted, sunlight bled across the floor. A man stood on the porch, tall, weathered, thick coat, badge tucked crooked beneath the lapel, gun visible, mouth curled in something just short of a smile. Boy, the man said. The boy didn't move. Your mama here? No, sir. You alone? No, sir. You belong to someone? She said I belong to her. The man tilted his head. She got a name? She used to. Used to? She doesn't use it much anymore. Behind the wall, she pressed her palm flat to the wood. Every nerve in her body begged to run, to scream, to hide. The boy stepped forward. The man's hand drifted toward the grip of his pistol. She said if I looked like Mama, you wouldn't shoot. The sheriff blinked. Then, just a hair, his hand dropped from the gun. He squinted. What's your name, boy? The boy didn't answer. The man shifted his boots. Dust rose off the boards. You look familiar. I should. Why's that? You watched me get born. The man didn't laugh, just stared. You have a smart mouth. She said you'd say that. You think I'm afraid of ghosts? No, sir. But she said you're afraid of memory. The man stepped forward. One boot creaked. She came through the door then. Fast. Silent. Moved like the floor itself pushed her forward. He looked up. Well, he said, I was wondering if this place still had a pulse. You ain't welcome here. I'm not here to be welcomed. Are you here to finish what you started? He smirked. Depends what story you're telling. She stepped between him and the boy. This ain't a story. It's a graveyard. He looked past her. At the child. He's yours? No. Then what is he? Witness. He touched his badge. Slow. Big words for someone who disappeared 10 years ago. I didn't disappear. You buried me. You buried yourself. I just handed you the shovel. Funny, I remember you holding it. His jaw tensed. I didn't come here for trouble. You brought a gun. He looked down at it. Force of habit. Do you always carry it when you visit children? Only the dangerous ones. She stepped closer. He's 6. Maybe, maybe not. Why now? She asked. You stirred dust that didn't want to stir. I opened a door. You opened the wrong one. She crossed her arms. Town's been whispering again, he said. Let 'em whisper louder. They're saying Lena's boy walked back across the ridge. He did. Say he's living under your roof. He is. Say you're trying to call up old things better left buried. I am. He smiled then. I remember that fire in you. I thought it died on the porch. I rebuilt it. With what? Truth. The sheriff spat to the side. You ever think maybe the truth's what started all this? She stared at him. You remember what you did to her? His silence was answer enough. She told me, the boy said quietly, that you used to come when it rained. The sheriff turned his eyes back to the child, said you never knocked twice, that you smelled like cedar and sweat. He stiffened, said you took things from her, words, names, pieces. The man's face cracked just for a second. She didn't blink. She said you kept her name in a drawer, that you signed it when you needed silence. He reached for the badge. Careful, she said. He paused. This is still mine. No, it ain't. Not anymore. You think that fire burned my name off the rolls? I think your name's Ash. The boy stepped closer. She said you lost your name the day I was born. The sheriff stared at him. You're not him. I'm what's left of him. Silence dropped like a stone. Then, quietly, he holstered the gun. "You think the town's going to believe a ghost story?" "No," she said. "I think they already do." He looked at the porch rail, the handprint etched into the far post. "Lena carved that," he said. "I know. She carved her name beneath it. You sanded it off. And now it's coming back." He turned, stepped down off the porch. "Careful," she called. "Land soft this season." He didn't turn around. The boy watched him go. "He ain't coming back quiet." "No," she said. "He's coming back scared." The door creaked shut behind them. Inside, the fire crackled steady. Dusk settled heavy over the house, the sky bruising with purple and gold as the light flickered out. She stood on the porch, arms folded tight, watching him walk up the dirt path, his boots crunching the gravel slow, deliberate. He always walked that way, like he was the one who owned the place. He stopped just at the edge of the light, grinning that same grin that hadn't changed since the day he first came to her door. He tipped his hat, his hand brushing the brim. "I know who you are," she said, voice sharp as glass. He didn't flinch, just stood there, his eyes cold but amused. "That means you remember what you did?" he asked, a slow drawl hanging on each word. She gripped the porch rail, the badge, still rusted and bent, heavy in her hand. It burned her palm like it always had. "I remember everything." He laughed low, mocking. "I don't think you do." The boy was standing behind her now, watching silently, the wind tugging at his shirt sleeves. His eyes flickered between the sheriff and her, not speaking. She held the badge in front of her, her knuckles turned white. "I never forgot you," she said. "You just made sure I didn't remember." He stepped closer, crossing the threshold of the porch without asking. His presence filled the space between them like smoke. "Is that a threat?" he asked. "No," she said. "Just the truth." The boy's eyes shifted to the sheriff, then back to her. He stayed quiet, hands at his sides, like he was waiting for something. "You're a liar," she whispered. He smirked, leaning in closer. "And your mama lied too." She snapped, her words cutting through the air like a blade. "She didn't lie. You made her shut up. You made her forget." His grin didn't waver, but there was something different in his eyes now. Something darker, tighter. The boy stepped forward, closer to the edge of the porch, still watching, still listening. "Mama said you'd break when the truth came back," she said, her voice low but steady. "And now, it does." The sheriff's expression faltered, just for a second. It was barely noticeable, but it was enough. He looked away, the weight of her words settling in the air between them. He didn't speak for a moment, and for a long second it felt like time had stopped. The boy shifted slightly, glancing at her. His eyes were wide, dark, like he could see something she couldn't. She held the badge tighter, almost ready to throw it at him. "You think you're the only one who gets to tell a story," he sneered. "No," she said, shaking her head slowly. "But you're not the only one who gets to decide who gets to speak." His face twitched. That grin dropped just a little, replaced by something harder, something more familiar. He took a step forward, not backing down, not giving an inch. The boy stayed where he was, watching them both, but she could feel his gaze on her, steady and waiting. "I'm not afraid of you," she said, her voice firm, like she was reminding herself. "You should be," he said, almost whispering. "You should have been afraid years ago. When it all started." She gripped the rail, nails digging into the wood. "I was, but not anymore." The boy didn't blink. He didn't speak, but his presence felt like an anchor, holding everything still. She could feel his quiet strength, the silence in his gaze, and something else, something older, deeper, like he'd always known the truth that had been buried here for too long. She stepped closer to the sheriff. "You're not the man you think you are," she said, her words cutting through the last of the evening light. He stepped back, just a little, his eyes hardening. "You don't know anything about me." "I know enough," she whispered. "Enough to know you'll never be free of what you did." He raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" She nodded. "The truth doesn't die, it just waits. And now it's awake." He seemed to breathe deeper, his shoulders tight. His eyes flickered between her and the boy. "Nothing's gonna change now," he said. "You can't undo what's been done." "I don't need to undo anything," she said. "I just need to make it right." He laughed again, low and bitter, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You think you can fix what was broken?" She didn't answer. The words were already hanging in the air, heavy and real. She stepped back, her eyes locked on him, then glanced down at the boy. His hand brushed against hers, just a light touch. It was small, but it grounded her in a way she hadn't expected. The boy wasn't afraid, and that made her fearless. The sheriff took one more step back, eyes narrowed. "This isn't over." "No," she said. "But it started." The boy looked up at her, then at the sheriff. "Mama said you wouldn't be brave enough to fix it." The sheriff didn't respond. He turned, walking back toward the dirt road, his boots heavy on the ground. His shadow stretched long behind him. As he left, she let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. The boy didn't speak. She turned to him, her hand still gripping the badge, feeling the weight of it in her palm. "You're the only one left to hear it," she whispered, "and I'm ready to make it right." He didn't answer, just stood there, waiting. And for the first time in years, she felt like she was finally telling the truth. The air around the barn felt different, colder, like it was holding its breath. The boy didn't need to say anything. He just walked, the dirt under his feet soft and wet, and she followed. Her boots sank into the ground, but she didn't care. The well was behind the barn, tucked in the shadow of the leaning structure, hidden by tall grass and tangled vines. She hadn't seen it in years. I hadn't thought about it in longer. The boy stopped a few feet from the edge. His eyes were still, empty. Not a child's gaze anymore, but something older, something wiser. He pointed down. "That's where she went," he said. The wind shifted, brushing past them, carrying the scent of earth and decay. She stared down at the dark hole. It was still there, still holding whatever it was that had never quite left her. "Help me with the rope," she said. He didn't hesitate. The boy stepped forward, his small hands wrapping around the thick coil of rope. He didn't say anything, just handed it to her, and she began to lower it into the well. The sound of the rope scraping against the stone was the only noise. Everything else was drowned in the thick, suffocating silence. She gripped the rope tighter as it descended into the black, the weight of it pulling against her. She felt like she was being dragged into the past, inch by inch. Every moment seemed to stretch, and still the rope kept going down. "Do you want to know what's at the bottom?" he asked, his voice quiet but steady. She didn't answer at first, just continued lowering the rope, the thick strands slipping through her fingers. Finally, she stopped. The rope didn't go any further. She looked down into the darkness. It felt endless, but she couldn't look away. The air felt heavier now, more suffocating. "Pull it up," she said. The boy tugged at the rope, slow but strong, like he'd done it 100 times. When it was up, she saw what had caught on the end. A baby blanket. It was stained and worn, the once soft fabric now torn and brittle. She dropped to her knees in the dirt, her hands shaking as she reached for it. The silver hair clip was still attached to one corner, catching the dim light. Like it was waiting for her to remember something. She ran her fingers over the cloth, feeling the faint traces of warmth, of life that had been there once. Her chest tightened, her throat closed. The boy knelt beside her, his gaze steady, his voice barely a whisper. "She told me," he said, "you gave her up so she'd live." Her breath caught, but she didn't speak. She couldn't. The weight of his words hit her like a storm, tearing through her defenses. She hadn't given anything up. Not for him. Not for anyone. She had been broken, yes, but she hadn't given anything. "Who?" she whispered, her voice cracking. "Who told you?" He looked at her, eyes clear and calm. "Mama." The words hung in the air like smoke, thick and suffocating. She looked down at the blanket again, then back at him, feeling the ground shift beneath her feet. "Why didn't you tell me before?" she asked. "Wouldn't have mattered. You wouldn't have listened." She gripped the fabric harder, her nails digging into the worn threads. "I couldn't." "You didn't want to." She shook her head, slowly, painfully. "I was trying to survive." He nodded. She knew. "That's why she left you the blanket. Said it was the only way you'd ever find your way back to her." She wiped the tears that had started to spill over her cheeks, not caring anymore. The boy didn't look away, didn't move. He just let her feel the weight of it. The truth. She stood up slowly, holding the blanket in her hands, as though it were the only thing tethering her to something real. "Where's she now?" "She's gone," the boy said, his voice softer now. "But she's not far." She turned and looked toward the barn, the place that had once held so many of her memories. Now it felt like a tomb. The boy stood beside her, and together they stared at the darkened door. "She said you'd find her again," he whispered. She looked at him, the weight of it all pressing against her chest. "I didn't know," she said, her voice barely audible. "I know." The air felt heavier now, like the world was pressing in. She looked down at the blanket again. The silver hair clip, the one thing left of her sister, of the past. "She left you something to hold on to," the boy said, as if he had read her thoughts. "A memory, a choice." She stood still for a moment longer, breathing in the silence. The wind stirred the grass at her feet. She could feel it. That memory, the thing that had always been with her, even when she didn't know it. "I didn't give her up," she whispered, her voice shaking. "I tried to keep her safe." The boy didn't respond. He just watched her, his expression unreadable, but his eyes soft with something she couldn't name. She took one last look at the well, at the blanket, at the boy beside her. And, for the first time, she felt like she was finally ready to listen. "Are you ready to hear the rest?" he asked. She nodded slowly, gripping the blanket tightly in her hands. "I think I am." And then, together, they turned back toward the barn. The sheriff's boots kicked up dust as he dragged the boy through the dry earth, his grip tight on the child's arm. The boy didn't struggle, didn't look back at the woman who stood behind them, barefoot, badge in her hand. She could feel the weight of it in her palm, cold and heavy, like it was waiting for something to break. The town was dead quiet when they reached the square. People stood in their doorways watching, their faces blank, but their eyes sharp. The air felt thick with the things they didn't say. She followed them, one step behind, the sound of her bare feet slapping against the hot ground like a drumbeat. She didn't hurry. I didn't need to. The sheriff didn't glance back at her. He just kept walking, his head high, as if this were some regular business. The boy, however, looked over his shoulder once, then again. His face was still, his eyes empty. By the time they reached the center of town, the sun hung low, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement. She was still behind them, taking each step like it might be the last one she ever took. The sheriff stopped in front of the old church, a building that hadn't seen a congregation in years. He turned toward her, lips curling into something between a grin and a sneer. "You're still following, huh?" he said, as if it were a joke. She didn't answer. The townsfolk watched, and still no one moved. "Where's the paper?" she asked, her voice steady, almost calm. The sheriff didn't answer right away. He just shoved the boy onto the steps, pushed him forward like he didn't care where he landed. Then, without a word, he reached into his coat pocket, pulled out a piece of crumpled paper, and tossed it on the ground at her feet. She bent down and picked it up. The name was still there, written in black ink. "You signed her name off the birth record," she said, her eyes lifting to meet him. He grinned wider, his teeth showing in the fading light. "And wrote mine instead," he said. Her heart stopped. She didn't let herself blink. She stared at him, holding the paper tight. The boy's eyes flickered. He looked up at the sheriff, then at her, as if trying to find something that wasn't there. "Why?" she asked, the words slipping out like she didn't want it to. He shrugged, his grin never leaving his face. "Why not? It was easier that way. You weren't around. And she was a mess." "She wasn't a mess," she whispered, though the word felt like it had 1,000 sharp edges. "She was drunk," he snapped, "and you know it. Always going off with that man, never home when she was needed." "Who are you to say who's needed?" "Who am I?" He laughed, the sound bitter and raw. "I'm the one who made sure your sister stayed dead. When you couldn't be bothered to bury her, I'm the one who signed her away. And I'm the one who put you in that house." She looked at the paper again. The name was hers, but it wasn't her. It was what he had decided to write. "You didn't just take her name," she said quietly. "You took her life." He stepped forward, close enough that she could feel the heat of him, the weight of his presence pressing down. "No," he said, leaning in. "I didn't take anything. She gave it to me. She begged for it, told me to make it look like she had a family, told me to make sure you didn't ever get near her again." Her jaw tightened. "She gave you up," he continued, almost in a whisper, "just like she gave me the boy, and you've been chasing ghosts ever since. Stop lying. You don't get to tell me what's a lie. You don't even get to say her name anymore." She took a step back, the badge in her hand burning her skin. "You're the one who buried her, not me." He stepped closer, his hand reaching out toward her. She flinched. "I gave you a chance," he said. "I gave you the name. All you had to do was take it. You could have lived your life. You could have had him. You stole it." She threw the paper down. He grinned again. "What's the difference? You weren't here." "I came back," she said, her voice hard now. "I'm here now." The boy stood motionless on the steps, his eyes fixed on the sheriff. "You can't fix what you broke," she said, the words cutting her tongue. He laughed again, that same bitter laugh. "I didn't break anything. I did what was necessary, and now it's all been paid for." She stepped closer. "I'll never forget what you did." His smile slipped for a moment, but only for a moment. Then he turned and started walking back toward the road. "None of us ever do," he said over his shoulder, his voice sharp. She didn't watch him go. Instead, she bent down and picked up the crumpled paper. The boy was still looking at her, eyes wide, still. "Are you ready to go?" she asked softly. He didn't answer right away, but finally he nodded. "Yeah," he whispered. "Let's go home." And as she turned away, the town behind them quiet, she felt the weight of the badge still in her hand, a weight that didn't belong to her anymore. She let it go, let it fall, and walked away. She brought the boy home, one step at a time, like they were crossing a boundary that had been drawn too long ago. The road was quiet, the house just ahead, standing crooked in the fading light. The wind picked up, sweeping dust through the yard, making the trees rustle in a way that didn't feel like a welcome. He walked beside her, his steps slower now, more deliberate. He wasn't a child anymore, not in the way she remembered. He was something older, someone who had seen too much for his age. The porch stood just ahead, like it always had. It wasn't much to look at anymore. The boards had warped from age and neglect, and the railing leaned crooked, like it had been knocked over and set back up without care. She couldn't remember how long it had been since she'd fixed it. She stopped just before the stairs. The boy didn't need to be told. He stood beside her, waiting, his eyes drawn to the steps. "I thought we were done with this," she whispered, half to herself, half to the house that still smelled of old smoke. "It's not over yet," the boy said, his voice soft but steady. She turned to him, a flicker of something in her chest. Anger, fear, regret, maybe all of them together. "What do you mean?" He pointed to the beams of the porch, the darkened wood that had once been white, scorched and cracked from the fire. "Mama carved her name here." She looked down, not knowing whether to feel relief or dread. She had spent years burying that memory, the one where she couldn't save her sister, the one where the house burned and took everything she loved with it. But the boy was pointing at the beams again, his finger steady. She followed his gaze. There, etched deep into the wood, was a name. Not just a name, a message. It wasn't a carving she had ever seen before. "Mama," he said again. "She said it would be here, said you'd find it when it was time." She stepped closer. Her heart beat harder now, faster, like it was rushing to meet her in the past. She crouched beside the beams, her hands trembling as she brushed away the dirt. There, under the grime and soot, was the name. Lena. But it wasn't just her sister's name. There were letters. Not carved randomly. They had been placed there, carefully, in a pattern, each letter rising out from the beam as if it had been waiting to be noticed. Her breath hitched. "Mama carved this," the boy whispered again. She touched the letters with her fingers, feeling the rough edges, the indentations. It was her handwriting. "I didn't—" Her voice broke, the words too thick to say. She tried again. "I didn't write this." But she knew it. As soon as her fingers traced the lines, it was hers. Her own handwriting, the one she had abandoned when everything fell apart, the one she used to write letters she never sent, the one she used to write letters to her sister. The boy stood behind her, quiet, watching, waiting for something to click. Her knees buckled, and she sank to the ground. The old wood groaned beneath her weight, and she heard the sound of the wind rustling the leaves again, louder this time. "I never meant to forget her," she whispered, her voice shaking now. The boy crouched beside her. "She said you couldn't carry the weight of it anymore," he said, his voice soft but certain. She looked up at him, his eyes clear, knowing in a way that was too much for someone so young. "Why didn't you tell me this before?" "I wasn't supposed to." She pulled herself up again, one hand gripping the beam for support. Her fingers still traced the letters, her sister's name, her own handwriting. The truth finally rising from the ashes. "You didn't want me to find it," she said quietly. "No, ma'am." "But she wanted you to. She said it would set you free." She closed her eyes for a moment, the weight of it all pressing against her chest. The fire, the lies, the silence, the things she had buried so deep. "Why now?" she asked, her voice rough. "Because you're ready." She stood up slowly, not sure if the ground would hold her. She turned and looked at the boy who wasn't just a child anymore, who wasn't just a stranger to her. "Are you ready?" he asked again, his voice steady. Her hands still shook, but she clenched them into fists, feeling the rough wood beneath her fingers, feeling the weight of the truth finally settle in her chest. She nodded. "I think I am," she whispered. The boy didn't smile. He didn't need to. He stood beside her, watching the porch, watching the house, watching the past finally come back to life. They didn't speak again. There was nothing left to say. The fire had burned everything, but it hadn't burned this. The truth had waited too long, and now it has come home. The ground felt cold beneath her knees, the dirt rough and unforgiving as it pressed against her skin. The boy stood beside her, still as ever, but there was something about him now, something heavier in the way he breathed. She could see the way his small shoulders tensed, like he was holding something back, something she couldn't quite name. Her hands trembled as she reached forward, brushing the dirt away from the weathered stone. She didn't know how long they had been standing there, not speaking, just feeling the weight of everything that had been left unsaid, unsolved. The wind was quiet, almost too quiet, as if the earth itself was waiting for the moment to pass. "She was my sister," the woman whispered, her voice rough, cracked with the years of silence she had kept. She hadn't said the words aloud in so long and hadn't let herself feel them. The boy nodded. He didn't say anything, just stood there, watching her as she continued to dig into the dirt. His gaze was steady, like he understood, like he knew what it meant for her to finally speak the truth. "She died naming you," she said, more to herself than to him, her voice shaking now. She told me I couldn't forget her, that you would remember for both of us." The boy looked at the ground, the corners of his mouth tight. He didn't cry. He didn't need to. "I couldn't save her," she whispered, her hand hovering over the spot where the stone should have been. "I should have done something. I should have stopped them." The boy stepped closer, kneeling beside her now. He didn't say anything. His silence wasn't heavy. It was just a quiet presence, a comfort she hadn't known she needed. She let her fingers trace the rough surface of the stone, the coldness of it seeping through her skin. It was real. It was here. Her sister's name, the one she hadn't spoken aloud in years, was carved into the stone. Lena. She closed her eyes. She had never wanted this. She had never wanted to be the one to bury her sister, but she had. And now, in the silence, she realized how wrong she had been to let it all end like this. She had thought the fire had taken everything, but it hadn't taken Lena. Not really. She was still here, in the name carved into the stone, in the way the boy carried her memory. The sheriff came then, not with fire, not with violence, just with silence. She didn't hear him at first, didn't notice his presence until she looked up, and there he was, standing at the edge of the clearing, watching her. His face was set, hard as the stone in front of her, but there was something else there too, something she hadn't seen in a long time. Fear. He didn't step closer. He just stood, waiting for her to speak, waiting for her to make the next move. She didn't look away. She didn't flinch. She stood slowly, every muscle in her body aching as she pushed herself upright. Her legs trembled, but she didn't let herself fall. "You're too late," she said, her voice quiet but steady. The sheriff didn't answer right away. He just stood there, his hand resting on the gun at his side. He didn't need to speak. His presence was enough. "I never wanted to be the one to finish this," she said, taking a step toward him. "But you made sure I had to." The sheriff's eyes flickered just for a moment, but it was enough. Enough to remind her of all the things she had tried to bury. "You buried her wrong," she continued, her voice growing stronger now. "You took her name. You took her life. You made sure no one would remember her the way she should have been remembered." The sheriff didn't move, didn't speak. He just watched her, waiting. She stepped forward again, closing the distance between them. The boy was still behind her, silent but present. She could feel him there, standing with her in a way that made everything else feel smaller, more manageable. "I'll finish it right," she said, her voice steady, a fire building in her chest. "I'll make sure the truth comes back. I'll make sure you don't erase her anymore." The sheriff's face darkened. His hand tightened on the gun. "You think you're going to fix this?" he asked, his voice low, dangerous. "You think you can change what's been done?" "I don't think," she said, her voice cold. "I know." She turned her back to him now, facing the boy, her hands shaking but firm. "Let's go home," she whispered, her words directed at him, at both of them, at everything they had lost and everything they were about to find. The boy nodded, stepping forward. He didn't say anything. He didn't need to. He had already said everything in the way he had carried her sister's name. The sheriff didn't move. He didn't speak. He just stood there, watching them as they walked away. And as they left the clearing, she didn't look back. She didn't need to. The truth had already been set in motion, and no one could stop it now. The porch behind them, the one that had burned so many years ago, would stay a memory. The house would stand. The boy would grow. And she would never stop telling the truth. She would never stop making sure Lena wasn't forgotten again. And the sheriff? He would stay where he belonged, buried in the past, alongside the lies he'd told. At dawn, the air was still heavy with the remnants of the night. She woke to the quiet creaking of the floorboards beneath him, the soft shuffle of his bare feet across the porch, and the steady sound of wood being stacked. The boy worked in silence, his movements slow and deliberate, each log placed with care, each piece added to the pile with purpose. She didn't stop him, didn't tell him to hurry. He'd been doing this since they'd returned to the house, stacking firewood like it was the only thing that mattered. She didn't ask why. She knew. He was doing what she couldn't, putting the pieces of their world back together, one log at a time. She stayed inside by the hearth, watching him from the window, the dim light of morning casting long shadows across the porch. The fire that had once ravaged the house seemed to still linger in the corners of her mind, the smoke and heat still choking the air. But it was different now. It wasn't the same fire that had burned her sister's name, that had left ashes in its wake. Inside, she reached for the iron poker. The hearth was cold. She didn't bother with kindling this time. She knew the way the wood would catch if she placed it right. She arranged the logs carefully, just like he had stacked them outside. The boy came in then, stepping through the door with quiet purpose, his hands stained with the marks of his work. He stood beside her, his eyes on the pile of wood in the stove. He didn't say anything, just waited. She reached for the matchbox, striking it against the side of the stove, and the small flame flickered to life in her hand. She held it to the dry wood, watching the sparks jump. A small fire began to grow. As the flame spread, she saw it, the faint marks on the stone above the hearth. A name scratched carefully into the surface, faint but clear. It wasn't her sister's name. It wasn't the boy's. It was her own. She stepped back, her breath catching in her throat. The name, spelled right this time, her own name. She hadn't written it. It hadn't been there when she had first come back to the house, but now it was. It had been there all along, hidden beneath the layers of dirt and memory. She looked at the boy, her heart in her chest, still beating, still alive. He didn't look at her. His eyes were on the fire, his hands at his sides. "Mama said you'd remember who you are," he said quietly, his voice steady but soft. She nodded slowly, the words settling in her bones. She had remembered. She had carried so many names in her life, but this one, her name, was the one she had forgotten the most, the one she had buried the deepest. The fire caught now, the flames licking up the sides of the wood, crackling in the silence between them. She felt it then, the heat in her chest, in the pit of her stomach. It wasn't the fire from the past, the one that had taken so much from her. This fire was different. This one held. She bent down and pulled the kettle from the hook above the stove, the familiar sound of it settling into the heat. The warmth of the kitchen felt good on her skin, like a promise. The boy watched her, but still, he didn't speak. He didn't need to. She knew he understood. He knew what this meant. The air in the room shifted, lighter now, less dense. She stood tall as the flames grew, their warmth pushing back the cold that had been settling in her bones for too long. She didn't reach for the badge this time. I didn't need to. She had laid it down already. The boy sat by the stove, close enough to feel the heat, but not too close. His eyes flickered between her and the fire, his gaze steady and sure. She smiled then, a slow, small curve of her lips. It wasn't much, but it was enough. The fire held. It didn't flicker out, didn't fade. It stayed. And as it grew, so did something else in her. A piece of herself she hadn't realized was missing, the part that remembered who she was. She poured the water into the teapot, watching it steam. For the first time in a long while, she felt like she had something she could hold on to. Not just a house, not just a name, but something that had been hers all along. The boy didn't move. He didn't ask for anything, just sat by the stove, his hands folded in his lap. She set the teapot down, and, for the first time in years, the house felt full of warmth, full of memories, full of what she had forgotten, and what she was finally ready to carry again. As the fire burned steady, she sat beside him. The silence between them wasn't empty anymore. It was full of everything that had been left unsaid, and for the first time, it felt right. She didn't know what came next. She didn't know how it would all unfold, but for now, for this moment, it was enough. The fire held, and so did she. Did.